For one of this week's top stories, President Trump has been ramping up pressure to designate the Muslim Brotherhood, an organization whose influence spans multiple continents and even institutions and universities on U.S. soil, as a terrorist organization. Here to discuss the implications and challenges of the move, we're joined by the Washington, D.C. coordinator for ISGAP, Dalia Ziada. Dalia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jake. Happy to be with you.
So first, I would like to ask you to kind of, introduce the audience, talk a little bit about who you are and what ISGAP does.
Personally, I'm Dalia Ziada. I'm an Egyptian writer and author, and I'm now based in Washington, D.C., where I work as a Washington, D.C. coordinator for ISGAP, the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, one of the very few academic research centers who has been on the forefront fighting against anti-Semitism and extremism in the United States and other places worldwide. We have actually offices in Cambridge, in Canada, in the United States. And most recently, we came up, we actually initiated a process to educate policymakers about the Muslim Brotherhood, and this is one of the things I'm very proud of being involved on.
I would start by setting a baseline for maybe some readers or listeners who haven't been following the news and don't exactly understand what this process is or where it is in the, on the legal level, as in there were reports that Trump wanted to push in order to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. So has this already happened yet? Is it going to happen? Is there already proposed legislation on the table? Like where are we currently?
So right now we are living literally a historic moment. For the first time, an action on that level is being taken in the United States, targeting the Muslim Brotherhood by name. And I'm speaking specifically about the executive order that President Trump issued a few days ago. The most amazing thing about this executive order, number one, is that, first of all, it names the organization by name. It labels the organization a threat to U.S. national security, and thus asks the other authorities in the United States, especially the Treasury and the State Department, who are the two entities that can make such a designation, that can actually designate the organization according to law. It's not anything
right.
other than the legal procedure. These are the two entities that should decide and then label the Muslim Brotherhood a foreign terrorist organization. The designation is a process. Some people unfortunately expected it will be just one decision from the president and that's it, but it doesn't happen like this, right. Especially in a liberal democracy like the United States. Like if, for example, it is Egypt or United Arab Emirates or Saudi, where the rulers or the people in power control everything, yes, it's easy to make such a decision overnight. But in a Western democracy like the United States, it's very difficult because it's a legal process. So where we are now, the legal process to designate the Muslim Brotherhood has already been initiated. The Muslim Brotherhood is already under pressure as a result of this executive order because it has to justify itself, it has to defend itself. The executive order also targeted three main chapters of the Muslim Brotherhood in three specific countries, Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt. We know Egypt, it's the country where the organization started, and we saw actually it's perhaps the easiest to document the atrocities of the Muslim Brotherhood and justify why they need to be labeled a foreign terrorist organization by the United States. Jordan and Lebanon are still difficult, but there is already evidence. And I believe the reason for targeting these three chapters in particular, because many of their members over the past decade or 15 years or so fled from these countries to, after being designated or banned in these countries, fled and came to the United States and other Western countries claiming to be political opposition or human rights activists and so on. So if these chapters are designated, the link will be much easier to make with the activities of the Muslim Brotherhood inside the United States. And this is what matters for the Treasury and the State Department to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as an entire organization eventually.
And do you expect that, obviously, as you said, there's an ongoing legal process that has, formalities and procedures. Do you expect it nevertheless to go through and succeed and for this designation to happen in the end?
I'm very optimistic actually that this designation is going to happen because for many reasons. First, to understand why it's different this time, we have to look at how the Muslim Brotherhood evolved over time. The Muslim Brotherhood in the West, the Muslim Brotherhood actors in the West, how they evolved over time. So from the very beginning, they learned that they have to manipulate the legal system, the political system, and work within this system, not to break it. Only in the last 2 years, we started to see them showing us the real ugly face for the first time, under the claim that they are supporting a humanitarian situation in Gaza or criticizing, quote unquote, of course, we know it was not criticism, Israeli policies,
Right.
and using this as an excuse to practice anti-Semitism towards the Jewish people inside the United States, and also as an excuse to demonize Israel and demonize the United States because of its support to Israel. So for the first time, we saw the coordination between the different factions of the Muslim Brotherhood and different organizations in the Muslim Brotherhood ecosystem in the United States. For the first time, we were able to link the dots between the violence happening in the ground by the actors of the Muslim Brotherhood inside the Middle East and the actors of the Muslim Brotherhood who worked on whitewashing this terrorism in the United States and other Western capitals. That's why this time the designation is really possible. It's not as difficult as before. They cannot claim anymore, we're just organizations, peaceful organizations representing Muslims. No, you are representing an ideology that terrorist organizations affiliated to your group in the Middle East like Hamas and so adopt. And thus you are also part of this ecosystem of the Muslim Brotherhood global network.
So you briefly touched on this already, but I think a question that a lot of listeners will be wondering about is, the Muslim Brotherhood has, they have a history that goes back at this point decades. I'm not going to go into the whole entire history of the Muslim Brotherhood. I will be here all day, but and I obviously recommend everyone who's not familiar to read up on them. But given this vast history that they have, or that it has, whether it be, I don't know, the evidence or making this clear link that you talked about, a lot of people are wondering why is this only happening now? Are there other reasons besides the ones that you touched on? Like when a lot of people think about this kind of story, I think they tend to welcome the decision, they tend to welcome the action, but it's paired with a thought of, this is a no-brainer. Why was this only happening in 2025?
Yeah, there are also two other main factors, actually. The first factor is the political will. Finally, we have a US administration that is willing to take an action on the Muslim Brotherhood without being afraid of all the accusations of Islamophobia targeting Muslims and all of that. The second factor, or the third factor, if we added the first factor, is that the Muslim Brotherhood showed us the real face in the past 2 years,
Right.
in the aftermath of October 7. The second factor is a political will. The third factor is that finally we are seeing some kind of an organization happening in the ranks of liberal Muslims, reformist Muslims in the West. Before, the groups the groups affiliated to the Muslim Brotherhood or ideologically aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood were the only one speaking in the name of Muslims in Western countries. Now, for the
Right.
first time, we are seeing, no, reformist Muslims, liberal Muslims like myself are coming together and trying to push against this and once again reclaim their identities that has been hijacked by these extremists. So all these factors together, and also the severity of, or the escalation we saw in the Middle East in the past few years, make it inevitable that now is the time to make it happen. Now is finally the time to make it happen before it's too late.
This paints a very good picture of where we stand today. Again, a lot of people would assume this is kind of a no-brainer. This is the obvious thing to do, but nevertheless, I don't think that should downplay the moment that we are currently in. I now want to move on to the implications, as in, assuming if this goes through, it passes through all the legal hurdles and the designation actually goes through, there are a bunch of implications that this has on many different levels. There's domestically in the United States, there's action, in the United States that don't necessarily relate to the Muslim Brotherhood directly. There's also, global effects, because as you said, like the Muslim Brotherhood is not just in America. It's in a bunch of different, there's chapters in different countries. So domestically, if this goes through, you already talked about connecting a link to certain individuals in the organization. The day this goes through, if this goes through, what's the next step? What happens? What does that look like? What action is being taken?
That's a very good question. There are different implications on different levels. So let's unpack them one by one. So on the domestic level, the immediate implication will be any organization that is publicly affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood or even ideologically aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood will be automatically shut down or banned. And thus its actors like the directors, the leaders of this organization will be prevented also from doing other activities in the United States under any other names, which is great because we know the Muslim Brotherhood in the West are very clever with mutation or reincarnation, as I like to say, into other names and other groups. So this is one thing.
That's good.
Because now we are designating the main ideology. It's Islamism, not Islamists. There is a huge difference. So this is the first implication, which is positive and great. But actually, it has also a negative side because it will, right now, the Muslim Brotherhood empire in the United States alone includes thousands of Islamic centers. And these Islamic centers includes mosques, schools, sports clubs, social hubs, and so on. Now, there is no such a thing for American Muslims, for the ordinary Muslims, other than those owned by the Muslim Brotherhood. If you take this away, you have to give them a replacement. You have to give the American Muslims a replacement. Otherwise, you will create a gap wherein will jump the groups that are even more extreme than the Muslim Brotherhood, like the jihadists, the Wahhabists, and we don't want this to happen. We have to be very careful that while crashing the Muslim Brotherhood empire, while crashing the Muslim Brotherhood empire, we can also offer a proper alternative that is supervised by the government that can give the American Muslims this infrastructure that the Muslim Brotherhood has always offered. This is one thing. This is on the domestic level.
Can I actually ask on that point? Are there any U.S. discussions you're aware of that are taking place in order to find this alternative, in order to supplement something without just taking away the mosques and the social services and all these other institutions?
Unfortunately, so far, no. All the discussions happening either on the level of policy or civil society are mainly about let's get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood, but no one is paying attention to what may happen. It's kind of, as the Italians say, throwing the water with the baby in it, So let's be careful not to do that, actually. So I hope we can create pressure around this to make sure this happens. And I know there are alternatives actually, but they are not empowered enough. They don't have the funding, the power to create a similar infrastructure like the ones that the Muslim Brotherhood built over decades of their presence in the United States. So this is a domestic level. If you look for outside the United States, like on the diplomatic global level, there are also good sides and challenges. So the good side is that all the countries that are now hosting and welcoming the Muslim Brotherhood will find itself in a dilemma, will have to make a choice. Especially I'm speaking about Qatar and Turkey, who are on one side claim to be strong allies to the United States, and Qatar actually is hosting a military base, and Turkey is a NATO ally, and so a military base for the United States, I mean, and Turkey is a NATO ally. So this is on one side, but on the other side, they are supporting and financing and politically whitewashing the Muslim Brotherhood, which its ideology is all about destroying the Western civilization and the liberal democratic values that the United States represents and holds dearly. So they will have to choose after this designation whether to continue with supporting the Muslim Brotherhood and lose the United States, or choose the United States and thus change their policies, not only with the US but also with their neighbors in the Middle East, Arabs, Israel, and so, in order to kind of open a new page of diplomatic relationship with all of them. So this is the challenge they will be facing. On another level, actually, there are some countries like Morocco, also in Jordan until recently, and I think there are still remnants of that, and other Arab countries, there are members of the Muslim Brotherhood in governments already, in government positions, in parliament, and so these countries will also have a problem because they will need to deal with that. They need to remove these people from power, and they also need to be careful while doing so to offer a replacement that is appealing to the Muslim communities in their countries, and at the same time is not as extremist as the Muslim Brotherhood. So it's
essentially mirroring what you were talking about in America.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, this is a many challenge, and I'm telling you this from experience because if you remember in Egypt in 2013, the Muslim Brotherhood came in power, then removed, then they were banned. But what happened after that, people don't know. The Muslim Brotherhood had a very strong hold over grassroots citizens in Egypt for many decades. Once they were banned and most of them arrested, many of them left the country entirely. Who filled in the gap? The Salafists, a group that is even more extremist than the Muslim Brotherhood. And they started to, now they are the ones in control of the grassroots citizens in rural areas and in places outside the urban Cairo and Alexandria and so, which is very, in my opinion, very dangerous, and we should have accounted for that. So I hope they can, like the US and other countries banning the Muslim Brotherhood, can learn from our mistake in Egypt.
I certainly hope so too. I think this then leads to a new discussion of where the fact that a decision was made to go through with this process, even though it hasn't, fully completed, is this a sign that, the Trump administration is planning to do more, not necessarily just against the Muslim Brotherhood, but against kind of any organization that, or any body or any foreign entity that does these similar actions? Because I know that ISGAP is very, very involved in this topic. I interviewed Charles Asher Smalls from ISGAP a little bit over a year ago, talking about, the Muslim Brotherhood, but also in general, just Qatar's influence on college campuses, which is something that has obviously gained a lot of prominence in the news over the course of the war. So do you think, in addition to this specific issue of the Muslim Brotherhood and replacing its influence, can we see similar moves from similar entities going to come out of this administration? And does ISGAP maybe have any policy in the barrel waiting to help push this forward?
Oh, yes, of course. Actually, we're working very closely with policymakers on also the other fight we have been, ISGAP, even before I joined them for so many years, I have been fighting, which is a fight against anti-Semitism. Because what many people don't know is that actually Islamism and anti-Semitism go hand in hand wherever they go. Anti-Semitism is only one of the main tools that Islamists use in order to infiltrate into Western societies and at the same time mobilize supporters from other non-Muslim groups. The most provoking example we saw also in the past 2 years in particular was what I like to call the sinful marriage between the Marxists and the Islamists. Some people call it the red-green alliance, which was so shocking. And we saw actually its clearest manifestation was on American campuses and also worldwide, I mean, but on American campuses in particular, where we started to see students who do not belong to Islam or even to the Middle East or to our chronic conflicts starting to adopt anti-Semitism as a way of life and practicing it as a trendy thing, and that they are proud of. They are even taking videos of themselves while doing it and publishing on TikTok and whatever platforms they use. So we started to see that. And actually people may think, oh, it's just spontaneous reaction by naive students who don't understand anything. But no, it's very systematic. It's purposeful, and it was planned for by the Muslim Brotherhood groups on campus. The most important of the ideologically aligned groups to the Muslim Brotherhood, as we know, is Students for Justice in Palestine, which if we go back, we will see its clear connection to groups like American Muslims for Palestine and MSA and all the other student groups that started a while ago under the flag of BDS, boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign. They just only mutated into a new organization today that promoted or claimed that they are standing up for a humanitarian situation in Gaza or supporting Gaza, but actually they were practicing and promoting anti-Semitism to the extent that they made it acceptable, by socially acceptable to practice anti-Semitism.
Also, I think I remember it's not just practicing anti-Semitism, it's openly embracing undisputable, like accepting content from undisputable terror groups. It's hard to remember sometimes because, so many things have happened over the course of the war, but at some point early on in the war, Hamas came out with their manifesto called, the Al-Aqsa Flood, Our Narrative, which was essentially their version of the October 7th massacre. And it was essentially being produced, published, and distributed and funded to be distributed on college campuses. So this wasn't just like a threat of something that might happen. This is something very tangible that we've seen, time and time again over the course of the past 2 years.
Exactly. And if you look actually at the literature of the Muslim Brotherhood, the main ideologues of the Muslim Brotherhood, the most famous one, perhaps Yusuf al-Qaradawi, he clearly instructed his followers in the West to use Palestine, quote unquote, which means in our language the Palestinian cause, as they understand it,
right,
as the glue to bring Muslim communities together and mobilize supporters from other groups like the radical left, the progressives, and so on. So, and this is exactly what they did. And why the campuses in particular? Because usually activism among student groups is the easiest thing to do. These are young people who want to feel like they are part of something bigger than themselves. They are not fully educated on the issues you're giving them. They are still so young and so fresh. And at the same time, they don't have something to lose. Like they don't have a family that they would think, oh,
right,
I shouldn't take the risk because of my family. And so this is usually the place that is very easy to recruit and indoctrinate, unfortunately, young people in, and they targeted it very, very successfully. And let me refer also to something very interesting. In July 2024, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence here in the United States issued a report about the encampments that happened in the academic year immediately before that.
Yeah.
And actually they said in the report that there were Iranian agents working closely with campus groups like SJP and others on organizing these encampments and these protests. So this shows you how big the foreign influence is, how big radical Islamists, regardless they are Sunni, Shia, whatever their background is, they are using the Palestinian cause. They are just following al-Qaradawi instructions of using the Palestinian cause as a tool, as a weapon to destroy Western civilization.
It really, I highly recommend anybody watching this episode to read up on it, because the vast scope is just astounding, really. Um, yeah, so I guess I could just leave it off there by saying that I think, we can all agree this is definitely a step in the right direction. I think we need to keep these challenges in mind. I think kind of in the same way that, where Israel's standing in the war right now with Hamas, it's easy to assume that it's over and there's nothing else to worry about, but there's actually a lot of fragile issues that still need to be ironed out. So we need to always be vigilant, but this definitely invites the right kind of action, and I could just say that we're very excited to see what future policy ISGAP has in store to deal with these issues. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jake. And for your audience who want to learn more about the Muslim Brotherhood, actually, we recently issued a report on the group and its activities in the United States, and it was presented to officials starting from the White House up to the Capitol Hill, and so you can find it now on our website, isgap.org, and we're happy to receive any questions you may have as well.
Amazing. We'll link it to the bottom. I highly recommend everyone read this stuff. It's incredible stuff.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.